Well, I do think the Sussex overdrive is unbelievable, but I mean, I don't think that he is going to get back in. I mean, I think that
Kate was called Waity Katie, waiting to marry William. While I imagine that was really hard, and I can't picture what that felt like.
For a long time, Tom Bower said nothing. As speculation around the royal family intensified and claims linking Meghan Markle to multiple controversies circulated online and in the press, he declined to comment. For an author known for aggressive investigations, that silence stood out. Tom Bower has built his reputation on documentation and timing. He does not respond to rumor in real time. He watches what happens after a rumor appears, who reacts, who stays silent, who issues denials, and who changes behavior. In Bower's method, reaction itself is evidence, even when words are not.
But they could never win. We know now in hindsight that Meghan never really intended to stay. Her guest list to her wedding showed her real ambition.
During this period, several royal crises overlapped: legal pressure on Prince Andrew, public fallout from the Sussex's media projects, and institutional silence from the palace on multiple fronts. None of these events were caused by the same trigger, but they unfolded within a compressed timeline. For Tom Bower, that compression mattered. According to people familiar with his approach, Bower was not interested in individual allegations. He was interested in patterns of response, which stories provoked immediate correction, which were ignored, and which prompted visible institutional movement without explanation. Silence, in this framework, is not absence, it is data. As Meghan Markle remained a recurring figure across these controversies, Bower did not frame her as the source. He framed her as a constant, someone present at moments where institutions recalibrated their behavior. She was not accused of wrongdoing, but consistently positioned near points of tension. This distinction was deliberate. Bower understands that accusations invite defense, context invites reflection. But he also watched public interpretation evolve. Early speculation was dismissed as tabloid excess. Later, repetition changed perception. When similar questions resurfaced without correction, silence began to feel intentional rather than incidental. Bower did not validate those questions. He observed how institutions handled them. This is why his silence lasted. According to colleagues, Bower waited until enough behavior had accumulated to speak without alleging. His goal was not to introduce new claims, but to explain why certain claims persisted, why some stories refused to disappear despite a lack of proof. The answer, in his view, lay not in what was said, but in how power responded. By the time Bower chose to comment, the environment had shifted. Public trust in royal narratives was already strained. The Sussexes' relationship with media institutions had deteriorated. Palace non-responses were being read less generously. In that context, even measured commentary carried weight. When Bower finally broke his silence, he did not name crimes. He did not publish new allegations. He spoke about systems, about access, and about how institutions decide when to intervene and when to wait. He explained that repeated proximity to controversy, even without fault, can alter how institutions behave. That explanation reframed the conversation. Instead of asking whether specific claims were true, audiences began asking why certain responses looked the way they did, why some figures were shielded while others were distanced, why silence appeared strategic in one case and dismissive in another. This is where the stakes escalated. Tom Bower's restraint gave his words credibility. He was not reacting emotionally. He was contextualizing behavior that had already occurred. That approach did not demand agreement. It invited reconsideration. For the palace, this posed a challenge. Responding to Bower would elevate his framing. Ignoring him would allow it to settle. Historically, the palace chooses the latter. Silence absorbs commentary without legitimizing it. For Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, the effect was more personal. Bower's comments did not accuse them of causing scandals. They suggested that their presence coincided with institutional stress points. That implication is difficult to rebut because it does not rely on intent or action. It relies on observation. By the end of this chapter, one thing was clear: Tom Bower's silence had not been hesitation. It had been preparation. By waiting, he allowed events to create their own record. When he finally spoke, he did not need to prove anything. The environment had already done that work for him. When Tom Bower finally spoke, he did not do so in the way many expected. There was no press conference, no dramatic reveal, no new allegation introduced into the public record. Instead, Bower addressed the atmosphere that had formed around multiple royal controversies and explained why certain claims refused to disappear. His focus was not on proving anything, it was on explaining why institutions behave the way they do. Bower drew a clear line between accusation and context. He acknowledged that many of the claims circulating online were unproven and, in some cases, irresponsible. But he argued that dismissing them outright missed the point. What mattered was not whether every claim was true, but why the palace reacted selectively, why some narratives were shut down immediately while others were allowed to linger. According to Bower's framing, institutional reaction is never random. He explained that royal systems are designed to assess risk, not fairness. When a story threatens constitutional stability, it is addressed. When it threatens reputation but lacks legal force, it is often ignored. Over time, this creates a visible pattern. Silence becomes a signal, even when it is not intended to be one. This is where Meghan Markle entered the discussion again. Bower did not accuse her of orchestrating scandals. He did not suggest criminality. What he noted was recurrence, her presence at moments where the palace recalibrated its public posture, her proximity to situations that prompted internal caution without external explanation. From Tom Bower's perspective, this recurrence altered how institutions behaved regardless of intent. That distinction mattered. Bower emphasized that institutions do not need wrongdoing to change strategy. They respond to pressure, exposure, and unpredictability. When a figure becomes a focal point for repeated controversy, even indirectly, systems begin to manage around that figure rather than confront the controversy itself. Inside Buckingham Palace, this logic is well established. Bower described how palace advisors assess not just events, but trajectories. A single incident can be explained, repeated turbulence cannot. When turbulence becomes associated with a person or a partnership, the response shifts from engagement to distance. That shift does not require blame. It requires pattern recognition. He also addressed the misconception that silence equals weakness. In Bower's analysis, silence is often the strongest response available. It denies oxygen. It avoids legal exposure. It allows time to reduce relevance. The palace, he suggested, had used silence not to protect individuals, but to protect itself from escalation. This explanation reframed several high-profile moments. Public observers had interpreted palace non-responses as avoidance or quiet endorsement. Bower argued they were neither. They were containment, a decision not to enter narratives that could not be controlled once engaged. For Prince Harry, this framing was particularly destabilizing. Bower noted that Harry appeared to interpret silence emotionally rather than institutionally. He assumed that if something mattered, it would be addressed openly. That assumption does not hold inside systems built to outlast individuals. In those systems, silence often signals that engagement would create more damage than restraint. Bower's comments did not settle public debate, they shifted it. Instead of arguing over the truth of specific claims, attention moved to institutional behavior, why the palace chose distance, why advisors recalibrated access, why certain lines of communication cooled without explanation. These questions do not require proof to persist. They require observation. This is why Bower's intervention mattered. He did not validate rumors. He validated skepticism about silence by explaining how power responds to recurring disruption. He gave audiences a framework that made institutional behavior legible. That framework did not accuse anyone. It challenged assumptions. The reaction was immediate but muted. The palace did not respond. It never does to contextual analysis. Responding would elevate it. For Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, the effect was subtler. Bower's comments did not attack them directly, but they undercut a central defense. As this chapter closed, one reality became clear. Tom Bower had not broken his silence to reveal secrets. He had broken it to explain how silence itself becomes part of the story. Broken it to explain why secrets are rarely necessary. Institutions reveal their priorities through what they address and what they ignore. Once that pattern is visible, speculation no longer needs confirmation to survive. That reframing did not end the conversation. Tom Bower's decision to speak did not trigger immediate consequences. There were no statements from the palace, no legal responses, and no formal rebuttals. On the surface, nothing changed. That absence of reaction was deliberate and followed a familiar institutional logic. Inside Buckingham Palace, Bower's comments were not treated as an event. They were treated as commentary. Commentary, even when uncomfortable, does not require response unless it introduces new facts or legal exposure. Bower had done neither. He had explained behavior, not alleged wrongdoing. From the palace's perspective, this made silence the correct response. Engaging would have elevated his framing. Ignoring it allowed the analysis to settle without becoming a confrontation. The institution has long understood that authors gain power through reaction. Without one, their words circulate briefly and then fold into the background. This is why outwardly nothing happened. Internally, however, Bower's remarks had an effect. According to palace observers, his explanation clarified something advisors had struggled to articulate publicly. That distance, not denial, had become the default response to recurring controversy. Bower did not invent that strategy. He named it, and once named, it became visible to audiences who had previously misread silence as confusion or fear. For Meghan Markle, this visibility mattered. Bower's framing did not accuse her of causing scandals. It suggested that her proximity to repeated institutional stress points had altered how the palace behaved. That implication is difficult to counter because it does not hinge on intent or action, it hinges on pattern. And patterns, once perceived, are resistant to rebuttal. For Prince Harry, the impact was more personal. Bower's comments undermined a core assumption Harry had relied on for years, the belief that silence meant absence of concern. Bower explained that silence often means the opposite. It means concern has been assessed and engagement rejected as counterproductive. That distinction reframed Harry's understanding of previous non-responses. This did not produce a public reaction, but it altered posture. According to people familiar with Harry's thinking, Bower's explanation reinforced a growing realization that institutions do not communicate reassurance, they communicate through behavior. Distance, reduced access, and procedural restraint are signals, even when no words accompany them. Hollywood and media institutions absorbed Bower's remarks differently. Producers and commentators did not treat them as revelations. They treated them as confirmation of something already sensed, that royal silence was not indecision, it was strategy. And strategies tend to persist once adopted. This recognition contributed to recalibration, not cancellations, not denunciations, but caution. When institutional distance becomes visible, other institutions take note. They do not rush to contradict it. They wait to see if it hardens into precedent. Bower's words changed the frame without changing the facts. Before, speculation was dismissed as rumor. After, it was contextualized as reaction to institutional behavior. That shift does not require agreement to be effective. It changes how audiences interpret future silence. This is why his intervention mattered. He did not settle any claim. He did not validate any accusation. He explained why the system behaved as it did and why that behavior should not be misread as randomness. In doing so, he made silence legible. The palace maintained its distance. That distance now looked intentional rather than evasive. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry continued without public response. That absence now carried a different meaning. The conversation did not end because Bower spoke. It changed shape. Instead of asking what was true, audiences began asking why institutions responded the way they did. That question is harder to dismiss because it does not demand proof, it demands interpretation. As this chapter closes, the outcome is clear. Tom Bower did not expose secrets. He exposed process. And in systems built on process, that can be just as disruptive. His words changed nothing in policy or protocol, but they changed how silence was understood. Once silence is seen as strategy, it loses its neutrality. And when neutrality is gone, distance becomes permanent.